Captain America Civil War, directed by the Russo brothers, starring basically almost everyone that was in the MCU at the time, as well as some newcomers. The story follows directly from the Winter Soldier and Avengers Age of Ultron. In the opening sequence, we see the new Avengers team in action in Lagos on a mission to stop a terrorist group led by Crossbones from stealing a biological weapon. The mission is only partly successful, but ends up in the tragic death of a bunch of civilians from Wakanda, which opens an international discussion. Should Avengers be acting independently? And based on what happened in Sokovia, the Sokovia Accords are introduced. It's a legal document, and if the Avengers sign this, they will basically accept oversight from the United Nations. If not, they will be forced to retire. Iron Man is on board, Captain America is opposed to the idea, which results in a rift within the team. And as all that is going on, Bucky, or the Winter Soldier, resurfaces again, and Captain America tries to capture him before the authorities do. And eventually these two story threads will come together and lead to full-blown conflict. So the movie was at the time the highest, the biggest superhero film of all time, essentially Avengers 2.5, not just in terms of the storytelling, scale and budget, but also because of the number of characters that are juggled in here. And to me, probably the most impressive thing about it is how efficiently the film manages to execute the things that it tries to execute without feeling too bloated or nonsensical or overfilled with characters. So on the one hand, we have the Civil War thing, conflict between Captain America and Iron Man, coming to a head and driving the team apart. I love everything about it, about this particular story thread, the way it builds on previous movies to make a point about the consequences of all these superheroics and the impact of them on civilian population. It also builds on the two character journeys. For Iron Man, who started off as an arrogant, independent guy who only trusted himself, but because of what he went through, he wants oversight now. He wants to give the responsibility to somebody else. And on the other hand, Steve Rogers started off believing in authority until that belief proved to be wrong with the fall of S.H.I.E.L.D., which leaves him distrustful of people other than his own close circle of friends and co-workers. And the wonderful thing about it is neither of them is completely right or completely wrong. I remember after the film having the discussions with my friends about it, and some of us were supporting Iron Man, some of us were supporting the Captain America argument. I'm in that second camp, but I think whichever you prefer, you have to admit that they both have a point, and crucially, you can understand why they have the views they have, what led them to do all of this. And that's one thing. The second you have to remember is that this is supposed to be primarily a Captain America movie, so it also has to, apart from the Civil War thing, it also has to continue the Bucky storyline and finish the trilogy in a satisfying way. And it also manages to do this part quite well. I think this thread is maybe not as tight as the Civil War itself, but it's still well developed and ties in nicely with the rest of the film. And it's also quite heartbreaking to see Bucky on the run, especially with the once again very physical action sequences directed by the Russos. And finally, the movie had the job of juggling all the different characters, plus introducing Spider-Man and Black Panther. And that seems like a lot, but I do believe that nobody was really done a disservice in the end. Pretty much all of the characters have a cool moment of their own. And especially Black Panther is absolutely fantastic in the way he's introduced and has a proper character arc of his own that is brilliant, but also has significant ties to the main plot. In fact, I think Black Panther as a character was done better in this film than in his own, and that's something. Other stuff that I want to mention, the costumes and special effects on point as usual. The humor lends a bit of levity when needed. The central villain is one of the best in Marvel history, and in fact will be making a comeback shortly in the upcoming Falcon and the Winter Soldier series. There's also the airport fight sequence, which is the bombastic moment of the film, and some people laughed at elements of it. That, for example, it wouldn't make any sense that the two teams just, start running at one another, or that the 1v1 fights would not make sense in the real world. And yes, to an extent, that is justified criticism, but you have to remember this is a comic book movie, a comic book adaptation, and that particular shot of two teams on the opposite side running at one another, starting to fight one-on-one, that is one of the most common staples of a comic book team-up ever. So as an homage, as a callback to the source material, this is actually quite brilliant, even if at first glance it does look a bit silly. Overall, though, I don't think there's too much you can nitpick about the film. I think it's pretty damn good, manages to successfully fulfill all of the tasks that it sets in front of itself and deliver on its promise, and more in some aspects. In my book, it is one of the better Marvel movies, even to this day.